UFC Fight Night Vegas 87, Rozenstruik versus Gaziev takes place this weekend, and I'm going to go through the entire card, starting with the early prelim opener, ending with the main event, giving my prediction and breakdown for every single fight on the card, starting with the early prelim opener of Ludovit Klein versus AJ Cunningham. AJ Cunningham is absolute garbage. They found any American-based fighter they could at lightweight just so Ludovit Klein would have a fight this weekend because he's traveling across the world to do so. So Ludovit Klein is going to beat AJ Cunningham because AJ Cunningham has not beat a single good opponent in his entire career. Not in his entire career. He's lost to some opponents, some known opponents as well. He lost his fight on the Contender Series. Bounced back against, yes, that's right, you guessed it, bounced back against 8-10 Justice Lamperez. That's who he bounced back against. And now he's in the UFC lightweight division. So Ludovit Klein's gonna fucking beat the shit out of him. We move on. Christian Leroy Duncan versus Claudio Ribeiro. You know what? Claudio Ribeiro's actually kind of dangerous. And at moments, Christian Leroy Duncan does seem like quite the hittable opponent. But I think something that's very dangerous is Christian Leroy Duncan with momentum. He's coming off a TKO win. Quite recently as well. Just 4 months later, he's making a return against Claudio Ribeiro, who has no good wins. He beat Joseph Holmes, who couldn't stuff a takedown and was a kickboxer, beat him by taking him down and beating him up on the ground, lost to Abdulrazak Al-Hassan, lost to Roman Kopylov, had a moment against Roman Kopylov where he caught him on the chin, but I never thought Roman Kopylov was as good as people were suggesting, which is why I picked Anthony Hernandez to beat him. Other than that, I just think Christian Leroy Duncan moves way better than Ribeiro. Way better kickboxing on the feet and the strength in the clinch and the strike and defense to make sure this doesn't go anywhere he doesn't want it to. If he wants it on the ground, he can try. Ribeiro's not going to be able to take him down. If he wants it on the feet, Ribeiro's going to have no choice about that. And I think Christian Leroy Duncan knows that, coming off a TKO win, whereas Ribeiro's coming off a KO loss. I reckon we're going to see Christian Leroy Duncan get a highlight reel KO. We move on. Loik Radzhabov versus Selwady. I'm going with Selwady over Loik Radzhabov. Loik Radzhabov, despite what his name may suggest, is absolute dog shit. He's awful. Trash. I know he's fought good opponents, though. And he did beat Esteban Ribovic, to be fair, actually, now I'm thinking about it. But I just haven't seen any real athleticism from him. I don't see any, fast twitch, things to watch out for if you're Abdul Karim Al-Selwady here. I think George Hardwick is better than Loik Radzhabov. That might be massive cope, but Abdul Karim Al-Selwady beat George Hardwick 3 rounds, outpointed him. He basically Volkanovski Holloway'd him in a way where he was the shorter guy on the back foot and it was the taller guy for a change in George Hardwick that had to try and find his way on the inside, and he just couldn't do that because Abdul Karim was switching stances, tapping at his legs, moving well, stinging him with shots, shooting a takedown here and there as well. He really did just Volkanovski Holloway George Hardwick, and was a nightmare style matchup in hindsight for him. Great skill though from this guy. Very, very dangerous guy on the regional scene. Had a lot of experience, trains at a great gym as well. On a massive win streak right now, got a ton of momentum. He lost a few fights to a couple iffy opponents at Brave, where he got finished both times with a knee to the face and a spinning elbow as well. But since then, he's been on an absolute tear, and I reckon he'll be able to beat Loik Radzhabov. I think he's coming into his prime. Even though he didn't stay too busy after the Hardwick fight, he kind of did because he took a grappling match in between. I like that he's sort of staying active with that. And I reckon he's going to beat Loik Radzhabov, who, again, I just haven't been impressed with so far in his career. Even against Ribovic, I wasn't too impressed with that performance either. He seemed like he was very open on the feet for shots. So I think Abdul will work up enough damage to where Loik's not going to be performing at his best after the first round of this fight. We move on. Javid Basharat versus Aiemann Zahabi. Javid Basharat's going to win. You know what? In hindsight, after watching Mateus Mendonça struggle so much at flyweight, I maybe don't mind the idea of the fact that Javid Basharat might be a tad bit overrated. However, they've put him against Aiemann Zahabi. This fight card, man, is funny. He beat Mateus Mendonça. He was in a very close fight with Victor Henry before the groin shot. I don't even want to say that he was winning. He might have been slightly ahead, but it was a very competitive tit-for-tat fight. But Victor Henry is a very high-level, unranked bantamweight. I'd say he's top 20 level, top 25 level in the UFC. And before that, Javid Basharat beat Tony Gravely, who I respect a ton. Trevin Jones, not too respectable, but hard to finish, hard to get out of there. So that's a good win for Javid Basharat again, I guess. And Aiemann Zahabi, want to talk about the comparative wins. Aori Chweleng is not really a good win. Ricky Turcios did not try to win against Aiemann Zahabi. He absolutely went out there trying to go tit for tat and not take any damage whatsoever and avoid any type of confrontation. I have no idea what Turcios was doing in that fight. So Aiemann Zahabi won the fight by decision. I was very shocked that Aiemann didn't finish him in that fight based on how Turcios was looking and what his game plan was, which was basically not to win, but to try and sneak a decision by rivaling up the forearms of Aiemann Zahabi. Draco Rodriguez, awful. The great Draco Leone, I know he's called. One of the worst resumes pre-UFC there's ever been. No idea how he got to the UFC in the first place. Oh yeah, they had him actually fight against Mana Martinez, who also wasn't UFC level in hindsight because he lost to Adrian Yanez on the Contender Series. So just shit, trash, awful. I'm going to go with Javid Basharat. Aiemann Zahabi's a good fighter himself. I just don't think he has the talent that Javid Basharat has in terms of his movement and his unorthodox striking, dynamicness. I think Aiemann Zahabi's a little bit too simple, and maybe he can beat Basharat at the simple stuff, but I think it's going to be the dynamic stuff that separates Basharat from Aiemann in this fight. It's going to be the spinning attacks, the mixing in of the grappling, the low kicks, the switching stances, the kicks to the body and the head. I think that's where Javid's going to have more success than Aiemann, but in the boxing, it might be quite even. We move on. Eryk Anders versus Jamie Pickett. It's 2024. Boy, I can't wait for Eryk Anders versus Jamie Pickett in 2024. Jamie Pickett, 13-10, is still in the UFC. In 2024, he's still here. Eryk Anders versus Jamie Pickett. Who's gonna win, I guess? It's just like what version of who shows up, like which one of them's going to be game on the night, which one's going to be looking for it, who's going to be shying away from the exchanges. These are the questions that we've got to kind of be asking about this matchup. To be honest with you, I was kind of convinced that Eryk Anders would win this one. But I don't mind the idea of a Jamie Pickett win. I'm just going to check over some things just in case I'm being absolutely deluded by saying that. Yep, I'm being deluded. We're going to go Eryk Anders. He was pretty close in hindsight with Marc-Andre Barriault and had a scrap with him. And he got dropped by Marc-Andre on that fight and still kept up for a bit of a scrap. And Marc-Andre had a scrap with Chris Curtis that was quite close. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Eryk Anders over Jamie Pickett in 2024. Jamie Pickett's awful. He's yet to have a win that makes you say, wow. Even his fight on the Contender Series wasn't impressive, but, you know, he got into the UFC, beat Laureano Strapoli, who's a welterweight from Argentina, who's... Joseph Holmes, as I said again, taking him to a decision doesn't look good. I'll go Eryk Anders. Jamie Pickett's on a 4-fight losing streak. I get giving him another chance against Josh Fremd, because you gave him Bo Nickel, it's unfair, and he got groin shotted. But, like... After he loses that one, why still It is what it is. We move on up the card to another fight, which is Raul Rosas Jr. versus Ricky Turcios. I've already made a prediction for this fight last week. If you want a more in-depth version of what I'm about to say, then I guess go check it out. It's still not confirmed whether or not this fight's going to be on the card. I'm glad if it is, because this card does need a bit more help. I'm going to go Raul Rosas Jr. over Ricky Turcios. I think he wins the fight. I think he's a better fighter in general. And, yeah, I think Ricky Turcios is finished. Like, he retired twice. I don't know if he even wants to be here anymore. Had a ton of hype coming off The Ultimate Fighter. For basically being autistic is essentially why he had hype. But he was a scrapper. He put it all on the line, but as far as I'm aware, soy genes, no fast twitch ability, no ability to finish on the feet, no ability to finish on the ground. Good scrambles, good pace, good conditioning. Just all of the technique in between is awful. So I'm going to go Raul Rosas Jr. because I think alongside being game and being gritty, like Turcios is, I think he's got talent. So I think talent's going to carry him here. Fast twitch muscle's going to carry him here. And I think he'll beat Ricky Turcios on damage throughout the fight, maybe slowing down in the third round. I don't see him finishing Ricky Turcios, though. We move on. Up the card, Umar Nurmagomedov versus Bekzat Almakhan. I'm going to go with Umar Nurmagomedov, funnily enough. I know this guy's good, though, from Kazakhstan. He fought some really good opponents. Back to back to get into the UFC as well. Like, he fought a bunch of good guys. So this isn't just some generic US guy that they just ship into the UFC at 6-1. They're awful. They haven't earned it, but they're from the US, so they get in anyway. You know how it is, the favoritism. Europeans and Eastern Europeans and other parts of the world have to go like 20-0 to even get a look in at the UFC, but it is what it is. This guy's good. He lost a fight against a very good opponent. Very, very good opponent. And then had to bounce back and build himself back up. And since then, he's had fights at Octagon, UAE Warriors, beat some good opponents. He's got good striking. He's got decent grappling defense. But again, the question is, are they Umar Nurmagomedov that's shooting takedowns on him? Not really. I don't see any massive weakness in this guy's game, to be honest with you. I don't see anything that he's like massively awful at that's going to be immediately exposed by Umar Nurmagomedov. I just think he's a bit frail looking. I'm just going to say it like that. Like, I think Umar Nurmagomedov, as much as people maybe aren't seeing it yet, is a fucking massive bantamweight. He's massive. He's 5'8". I know that sounds crazy to say. But at the build that he is, wide shoulders, lats on show, thick torso, strong shoulders, arms, chest. Like, he's a built dude at 5'8". in the bantamweight division. And I just think that this guy that he's taking on looks so frail and malnourished compared to him. I think there's going to be a massive strength difference in the grappling. I think both guys are going to feel each other out on the feet for a bit. I think Umar Nurmagomedov's going to get a takedown. Maybe this guy works his way back up to his feet, and then Umar is going to take the back and choke him out, I think is what's going to happen. So I'm going to say round 1, submission, Umar Nurmagomedov. We move on. Up the card, Matt Schnell versus Steve Erceg. I just can't pick Matt Schnell to win fights at flyweight. I need to trust your chin at flyweight. I can trust nearly every flyweight's chin. Even ones that I don't trust too much maybe get dropped or they get wobbled. They don't get finished consistently like Matt Schnell. His chin is worrying for flyweight. I'm going to go with Steve Erceg here. I think this is a tricky test for Steve Erceg, and I'm not entirely saying that Steve Erceg's going to destroy him. I reckon Steve Erceg might win this fight, but I think his finishing instincts aren't going to be good enough to finish off Matt Schnell, so I think what's going to happen is he's going to outdamage Matt Schnell across a decision and drop him in a moment to win himself a round. Maybe in the first, but then it gets dragged out into the second and third, where Erceg is just sort of outdoing Matt Schnell, wobbling him on occasion, stinging him and making him back up a bunch, maybe even dropping him again in another round as well. I just don't like the finishing instincts of Steve Erceg. I'm going to go against Matt Schnell. I'm going Steve Erceg, Matt Schnell, chinny at flyweight. Needs you to be malnourished in the sense of Suma Dwergi in order to implement any kind of offensive grappling against you. And other than that, he's just too open to get KO'd all the time. So he taps immediately to submissions without fighting hands or without trying to scramble. Tyson Nam took him to a split decision. Yeah, I'm going with Steve Erceg. We move on. Up the card, Alex Perez versus Mohamed Mokaev. I think it just makes absolute sense to follow the trend in Mohamed Mokaev's career and hope that he's going to continue this trend of going to the third round, looking awful for the first two, and then submitting someone in the third. So I'm going to say that Mohamed Mokaev wins this fight in the third round. It seems to be a trend in his fights where, like, he meets them in the grappling, they do good against him. He meets them in the striking, they do good against him. He maybe loses one of the rounds. Maybe I'll say that Alex Perez gets the first, and then Mokaev starts to chain his wrestling together in the second, and it's a little bit more clear of a round to him, and we start to see Perez start to slow down and sort of go for broke and overswing shots, trying to KO Mokaev and start to slow down massively, and then we see Mohamed Mokaev working his grappling in round 3. And I'm going to say that Mohamed Mokaev gets himself a... rear naked choke in round 3 is what I'm going to go for here. I think he's going to get the back of Alex Perez. I think they're going to be scrambling around, and eventually Perez is going to give up the neck, and Mohamed Mokaev is going to get himself a third round rear naked choke. That's my take. I think Perez is good, though, and I do think this is a jump up for Mokaev. And honestly, likewise with the main event, which I'm still not decided on, by the way. I could go Rozenstruik, but I might go Gaziev. These guys are going to lose eventually. Mokaev and Gaziev. Out of the Dagestani rising, and that sort of region of the world that's rising up, those are the two I have my eye on to sort of let down the team, if you want to call it that. Mokaev, he's so exploitable. I don't think Perez is the level to do it, but I think that maybe a Moreno or a Manel Cap or someone along these lines could be the guy to do it instead. And I reckon they will, but not Perez, because Perez is soy. Hasn't fought in ages, always injured, gets ragdolled in his fights and choked out in a round. I'm going to go with Mohamed Mokaev getting this one done in the third. But I think Perez will have a decent showing for himself. And again, we'll be thinking, well, Mokaev didn't look too good until the third round. We move on. Up the card. Vitor Petrino versus Tyson Pedro. I'm going to go with Vitor Petrino here over Tyson Pedro. I do like this matchup, though. I think it's a very tricky matchup for both of them. And I know a lot of people could just sort of look at their similar opponents and have a double-sided argument, which is basically, oh, look how good Tyson Pedro looked against Anton Turcauge, and look how bad Vitor Petrino looked against Anton Turcauge. And then you could say, well, look how good Vitor Petrino looked against Modestas Bukauskas, and look, Tyson Pedro lost to Modestas Bukauskas, but there's differences. Both of them fought Turcauge on full camp. Petrino beat Turcauge, and it was a grappling-heavy matchup where Turcauge had success. On the feet, he wasn't having much success. He wobbled, I think, Petrino once in round 2, but I honestly think if it would have gone past the first round in the fight with Tyson Pedro, it equally would have looked like a bit more of a sloppy decision as things went on. So I rate Petrino for that, and I don't like that, Tyson Pedro and Modestas Bukauskas and Vitor Petrino. Petrino smoked Modestas badly with a nasty KO, and Tyson Pedro lost to Modestas Bukauskas on a week's notice when Modestas flew across the world to Australia to fight him. From the UK to Australia, Modestas flew on a week's notice and beat him by decision. That shouldn't be happening. End of discussion. If this escapes the first round, it's going to be heavily in favor of Vitor Petrino, in my opinion. I think in the grappling, people will be surprised by Pedro. So I think it's going to be a stand-up fight where Petrino has most of its success. And I'm going to say in round 2, towards the end of it, we see Pedro start to slow down and Petrino start to muscle his way forward and get a TKO win in round 2. But in round 1, I think it's a very close fight. So, I don't know, keep an eye on the odds. If it goes past round 1, I'm leaning Petrino. See what the odds are after round 1. We move on. Up the card. Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Shamil Gaziev. Now, here's my problem with this main event. My everything about me is screaming at me to pick Jairzinho Rozenstruik. But I just can't because I know the sport don't make sense. Don't make any sense. Like, yeah, you know, Shamil Gaziev couldn't really control the guy on the Contender Series for a bit. Had his back taken, but the guy had a wrestling background and was a little ball of muscle and was quite athletic, to be honest with you. So, I get it. I don't think Gaziev's that good. And I think someone's going to beat the fuck out of him. Like, I really do. I think this guy's awful at fighting. 12-0, good record at heavyweight. Fought absolute fucking schmucks until he went to a split decision against Kornilov, which arguably he could have lost, where basically he couldn't get takedowns after a certain point and kept getting stung on the feet. But did get some takedowns in the fight, enough to win him the fight, of course, and even had moments on the feet in that fight. So he's deceptively dangerous on the feet and willing to throw in combination moving forward, which is risky at heavyweight, and not many people do it, but he does it. He throws in combination. Beat some decent opponents after that. Got dropped on his fucking ass by Darko Stosic. Dude, am I going to go Jairzinho Rozenstruik? Because Jairzinho is way better than anyone that has given Shamil Gaziev big problems. And even this other guy, Grigory Ponomarev, was that the guy I'm thinking of? No, it wasn't. There was another guy that I saw this guy fight. Was it Pavel? It was Pavel, who is now 7-2. Won every fight since then against good competition, actually. Now I'm seeing it. But yeah, that Pavel guy was cracking Shamil on the feet as well and stuffing the takedowns. I'm just thinking if someone else like Rozenstruik can stuff the takedowns, is he going to crack Shamil Gaziev on the feet? But I keep looking back at the Curtis Blades fight for Rozenstruik, and I start to realize to myself, outside of using the Mateusz Gamrot technique on the knee of Tom Aspinall, Blades is kind of dog shit as well. Like, his grappling has never been, other than tossing around Justin Willis, when has his grappling ever been like a massive, oh, wow, he's dominating? You know what I mean? I know he took down Volkov, old Volkov, before he became Swolkov and built himself up into heavyweight. So who am I going to go with? Jairzinho Rozenstruik or Gaziev? Gaziev a favorite, not by that much. Gaziev didn't really try and take down Martin Bede. He actually didn't shoot a single takedown on him. Ended up on top after hurting Bede and stopping Bede from going for takedowns. But was that because he had no respect for Bede on the feet? There's the reason why he didn't shoot any takedowns in that fight. Maybe that was what it was. He didn't actually shoot a takedown on Greg Velasco on the Contender Series, the guy he eventually finished by rear naked choke, because the guy got dropped and then the guy got the back of Gaziev on the ground. I'm going to go Jairzinho Rozenstruik, I think. I'm going to go with that. I'm going to trust my gut, and I'm just going to go with Jairzinho. I think Gaziev's got little pin legs, little stick legs. I think Rozenstruik can chew him up. Can Rozenstruik be taken down? Yes. But can he be finished in the first round? Almeida did it. But I think Almeida's a bit better with his finishing potential on the ground than Shamil Gaziev. So I think with basic survival instincts, Rozenstruik's going to have more opportunities as the fight goes on. And I think Gaziev is so unbelievably open on the feet. So unbelievably open on the feet. We've seen him dropped. We've seen him hurt. We've seen him stung. We've seen him look like gassed in the second round. Yeah, I'm going to go with Rozenstruik getting a KO. Round 1, actually, I think I'm going to go with. So we'll see. But I do like the fact that it's 5 rounds for Rozenstruik. So we'll see how it goes. I'm going with Jairzinho Rozenstruik. He's been in these positions before. This is the first main event for Gaziev. I'm going to bet on Rozenstruik as an underdog. See you later. We'll just see what happens. It's all a fluke anyway, isn't it? Like, just see what happens, man. I'll go Rozenstruik. I'll be more annoyed picking Gaziev and being wrong than picking Rozenstruik and being wrong. So fuck it, you know. What a shit card.